Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex. This is Big Baby Reviews. Today we're looking at what if Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. That is What If issue number 7, cover dated 1989. This issue is interesting for a few reasons. One, this is Rob Liefeld right before he starts to really climb to the heights of popularity and fame and fortune that he would hit with, New Mutants and X-Force. So this is just a little bit before that. It seems like he's starting to pick up a bit of steam. As far as popularity goes in mainstream comics, but he's still flying a little bit under the radar at this point. The second interesting thing about this comic is it's inked by Scott Williams, who we generally know more as a Jim Lee kind of inker. Back in these days, he was inking Jim Lee and Whilce Portacio, and eventually he would become, in around these years, the early 90s, exclusive to Jim Lee. So if you look at this cover here, it doesn't quite work for me as much as the interior art, and when I get there, obviously we'll talk about that. But specifically for this cover, there are parts of this, where I feel like basically Williams is trying to apply kind of a Whilce Portacio, Jim Lee type detail that works on those guys, but that doesn't quite work on Rob Liefeld. I don't think their styles are necessarily that similar, really. So applying that aesthetic on top here kind of gives you, I guess, a hybrid of, Scott Williams and Rob Liefeld rather than, very authentic Rob Liefeld or, some sort of inker really taking over the final details of an image as some do. So it's almost like if you took Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and crossed them together, this is what it would look like. So there are parts that, the face is a Rob Liefeld face for sure, the proportions and stuff. I just find the hatching is not. It's much more, the type of hatching that would be applied to a Jim Lee face. So it makes it look a little odd, I just think, it's just very, very weird. Also the finish on the glove here and this glove too, and this kind of stuff here, I feel is way more akin to Jim Lee or Whilce Portacio type detail and not so much on Rob Liefeld. Another thing that kind of catches my eye that I just think is kind of weird and to me doesn't fit with either Rob Liefeld or Scott Williams or what we know of their aesthetic is Wolverine and his arms here. So kind of a, undefined, not clean, scratchy line for the contours, which I guess is to heighten the fact that Wolverine is very hairy, has lots of hair on his arms, but it's kind of difficult to tell where the shadows and the hair start. And it's almost like very scratchy, not very clean, and almost more akin to something John Romita Jr. would do than either Scott Williams or Rob Liefeld. So I don't know quite what happened there. Just, not a horrible cover, just odd looking, to me, and that it's not quite Rob Liefeld, it's not quite Jim Lee, it's not quite Scott Williams. I do appreciate the use of screen tone in the back here. So it's the late 90s, artists are still using it, but in the 90s that'll kind of go away for a while and then it gets brought back later on. I know a lot of modern artists who like to work more old school in an analog fashion use that as well. The coloring also doesn't really help it here. I don't know why it's maybe because of the screen tones and how they were cut and stuff, but like I can clearly see badly colored sideburns here and the side of Wolverine's hair as well. I don't really see it as like a light reflection or something like that. It just, again, the way it cuts off here just seems like bad coloring. So it doesn't quite work here, but as we open up the comic and have a look inside, you're going to see that you're going to get more familiar Rob Liefeld art. So definitely this pinup showcases that. If you don't know, the Watcher always kind of introduces the issues of What If and the idea and explain the concept that we're kind of going out of continuity here. So this really not necessarily narratively important. It's just kind of a setup page for what this What If story is going to be about. Some uncharacteristic Rob Liefeld inking down here, I would say, right? This here seems more like, even though it's a lot of cast shadows that we don't see a lot of with Rob Liefeld, earlier on we do, and just the way he finishes it off with this kind of hatching seems very Rob Liefeld to me, and this pose and everything for sure. So the Watcher's just kind of explaining, the history of Wolverine's kind of origin or first appearance, right? That first classic fight that everyone knows about between Wolverine, Wendigo, and the Hulk. Liefeld chose to draw, actual more modern Wolverine mask, because at that time, if you have ever seen that issue, Wolverine had a weird, really weird looking mask that was eventually changed by mistake, but probably for the better. I'm gonna look at the credits here. So this is important, Jim Valentino script and layouts, right? So one of the things of this issue is that you'll see some more characteristic Rob Liefeld stuff and other panels and angles and things that you don't necessarily, or you're not used to seeing from Rob Liefeld. So you'll you'll get to see some familiar stuff and stuff that I think maybe Valentino is more responsible for, and probably in his storytelling, Valentino is a little more varied in his angles and shots than Rob Liefeld is. Rob Liefeld does tend to have kind of stock poses that he recycles, which is okay because I mean most of comics is that, you know, you're gonna recycle faces and angles and stuff constantly, right? Scott Williams brushes and quills, so I don't know if he's, you know, actually using brushes on this, possibly, but eventually he does become just using the 102 Hunt pen, right? Pen inking. Ken Lopez, calligraphy and special effects. So I'm gonna go with lettering and word balloons and sound effects. Tom Vincent, colors and hues, and anything else I don't really care about, to be honest. There's something I wanted to mention about this here. Yeah, so you know, in keeping with, you know, Rob Liefeld and McFarlane wanted to go kind of crazier and extreme, you know, as their careers progress and they move towards image. I'm going to assume that, you know, this is possibly supposed to be the Hulk has just hit Wolverine or Wendigo. I mean, it's odd because, you know, you think the head would be the other way. Rob Liefeld does this sometimes, but I do think this was not supposed to be saliva. It was probably meant to be blood, but obviously Marvel PG style at that time. Editorial probably told the colorist not to do that. So we've got some typical, even though we got the Jim Valentino layouts, as I said, we got a typical kind of Rob Liefeld pose here, right? So Nick Fury's coming to meet Wolverine in and around the time that he was fighting the Hulk and Wendigo. So that kind of places this in Marvel continuity before he joins the X-Men. So Wolverine has not yet kind of met up with the X-Men or Professor X or anything like that. So instead he meets up with Nick Fury. More than likely swiped this. The helicarrier, it's called, for S.H.I.E.L.D., was designed by Jack Kirby, and everyone just seems to be, you know, going back to those original few images that he drew of it back in the 60s. And because, I mean, it's an impossible kind of shape. I don't know, without reference, how you would be able to draw that. It's just a weird looking thing, and it always ends up looking like a Kirby creation, or at least a Kirby ripoff, because no one can draw it like Kirby, basically. So basically in the storyline, what you'll have to excuse me, I've got a slight summer cold. Nick Fury is explaining that they've kind of figured out how to create body doubles, you know, but they're being used. I'll read here. LMD stands for Life Model Decoy, an advanced android design made to look like and pass for a human being. Up till now, we thought the technology was S.H.I.E.L.D.'s exclusively. Looks like we was wrong. The script for Nick Fury. I guess they're trying to make him sound like an old guy from the 40s or something. Not sure if that's quite working, but not only have they managed to swipe it, but they've improved on it to boot. So some, you know, possible terrorists or evildoers now have the LMD life decoy technology, and they've improved on it. And they need Wolverine, because of his heightened senses and stuff, to detect these life decoy models. Life model decoys, rather. So right away, he asks them to sniff them out, and Wolverine does so right away, you know, swipes at Dum Dum Dugan, who obviously we find out here was not actually Dum Dum Dugan, but a robot decoy. So that's kind of the storyline here in this issue. These shots here through, you know, the ceiling and the structure and stuff, looking down. I don't know if Rob Liefeld does these down shots a lot. I don't know if he ever adds kind of that much kind of foreground element that helps create that sense of depth. So maybe that's more of a Valentino layout thing. I've noticed a lot of tilt and angles in this comic, and I feel like maybe Rob Liefeld took that to heart and used it later on himself, because I don't feel like he was doing that much before this issue with most of his art that I've seen. But, you know, even though he's working on Valentino layouts, these very much look like Rob Liefeld drawings. And again, now I'm going to talk about the inking. I feel like as if Williams is being a lot truer to Liefeld's pencil line than he is on the cover. And as you'll see when we move into the New Mutant issues, the first few issues are inked by, you know, kind of Marvel house inkers from the 70s and 80s, and they are not at all doing the same kind of aesthetic and being as true to Liefeld's pencils as we're getting from Scott Williams here, right? I do feel this is pretty close to Rob Liefeld's kind of, you know, extreme 90s style. And then when we get onto New Mutants, there's almost like a regression there. It'll happen to, I'm doing some of these episodes on Dale Keane as well. I feel like when he moves from Dragon Ring to the Hulk, they put some house anchors on him, and they really are trying to give these new artists more of a Marvel house style, kind of trying to mold them. And these guys are just, slowly but surely resisting and pushing through what they want to do in the art. McFarlane is famous for this. We'll talk more about it in the McFarlane episodes as well. But just slowly but surely moving the art into the style that they want to do, right? And a big part of that is with McFarlane and Liefeld is when they started inking themselves, right? That really helped a lot. And McFarlane would always encourage Liefeld at this time to start inking himself, and that's eventually what he did. If I'm not mistaken, near the end of New Mutants, he started really like in published issues, but definitely with X-Force #1 and those past issues after that, Liefeld was inking himself. Here's something that's uncharacteristically Liefeld, right? This kind of panel here, just maybe too many characters to draw for Liefeld generally, but I always thought this is an odd one, so I feel like this is kind of a Valentino layout and pose that Liefeld's kind of awkwardly trying to get down, and it's not working quite right. All of these, kind of typical Liefeld angles and stuff. I mean, also with the layouts, I've never seen the original layout, so he could be obviously, changing angles and panels and stuff as compared to what Valentino laid down. But I think the storytelling is pretty sound overall and not confusing. There's backgrounds and stuff that helps, so that's probably Valentino's part there. And like I said, very often using that tilted horizon line in the panel. This, I feel, is, not a typical Rob Liefeld panel, something that he would do. And in a weird way, he's kind of pulling, I feel, a little bit from McFarlane in the face here. Maybe Wolverine's hairline is receding a little too much. It's a little odd looking. I often and will mention that I find Rob Liefeld profiles always to be kind of weird. And that's not bad. But again, here's the weird part is the receding hairline on Wolverine, Cable looks cool with the receding hairline, and I'll mention also I do find this is almost proto Cable kind of pose with the gun and stuff. This is a very Liefeld Nick Fury. With someone like Wolverine who's very hairy just generally, his arms and everything, I don't think Wolverine is the type of character who should have a receding hairline. He's kind of animalistic and wolf-like or Wolverine-like, right? Hugh Jackman thought he was wolf-like till he actually figured out what a Wolverine was. He didn't think it was a real animal. Originally, when he was shooting the first X-Men movie. This is one of those classic, Rob Liefeld head-on group shots. Okay, just so I don't forget, you've got Wolverine here lighting up a cigar and Nick Fury smoking a cigar. I think I've talked about this at some point in a past episode, but the fact that Marvel has kind of banned characters from smoking, I think is just kind of stupid. Sure, smoke is bad for you. Smoking apparently could be seen as a bad lesson for kids and stuff. But I think kids are smart enough when reading comics to understand that, Nick Fury and Wolverine both, for example, have super healing powers. So call it a factor or power, whatever you want to call it. So if any characters, kind of should smoke because, their body will heal any kind of damages from that, it would be those guys. And it makes for interesting character traits, that make them a little bit different from all the other characters, right? That's kind of a little example, something you add to a character, give them a slightly harder edge. So I definitely think in modern comics today, they should bring back Wolverine and Nick Fury smoking cigars. So, villain revealed, Baron Strucker, Nazi villain, right? Eventually, I don't know if Baron Strucker ever actually had like Nazi insignia, but what they did with the old Nazi villains in Marvel is eventually to kind of move away from that Nazi aspect, they created Hydra, which is kind of a proxy villain for the Nazis in Marvel Comics. Excuse me again, that's summer cold. This is a classic Wolverine shot that we've seen 1,000 times by 1,000 different artists. So to say that Liefeld swiped it here, I don't know what the layout looked like. It's just, if you're going to draw Wolverine, you're going to do a pose like this. John Byrne did it. Jim Lee did it. It's just something, I don't consider it a swipe. It's just something you kind of have to do. It's, one of those poses that Wolverine, when in action and fighting and stuff, would probably find himself in. He's, kind of a gung-ho fighter who just kind of throws in without thinking too much, especially when, he goes a little cuckoo. I forget what they call that when he goes nuts. His berserker rage, right? So this is kind of a pose that's 100% akin to Wolverine. It's his pose. All right. Always thought this panel of both guys kind of rushing towards each other, even with the speed lines and stuff, just kind of weak. I'm not sure if that's a Liefeld thing or a Valentino thing. This is very Liefeld. I've seen this pose lots of times and the guy flying off. So maybe this is where Liefeld either got it from Valentino or, started pulling this kind of composition and using it over and over and over and over again. So we think we've gotten rid of Baron Strucker at this point. Nick Fury's taken him out. And of course, we get kind of a montage page, you can call it here, where Wolverine does, in fact, join S.H.I.E.L.D. and never joins the X-Men. Many other adventures here involving, once again, Nick Fury. We got a quick shot of Rob Liefeld doing Captain America, but it's so small here. It's not very akin to Rob Liefeld's style. You can't really, if you took this out of context, I don't know if you would guess that's a Rob Liefeld illustration. And the Watcher here, I feel like Williams has taken over, specifically with this one, with the inking and stuff. Nothing to do with Rob Liefeld here, I find. Again, this is another drawing that if I saw this kind of stuff here, just not stuff I'm used to seeing Rob Liefeld do. And just to finish off the issue, what happens is, Baron Strucker was not dead or defeated and somehow comes back, surprises Nick Fury while he's in his car, jumps or falls off. And this ship apparently crashes, got to pull up and over, splash into the water, explodes, as vehicles do in the water. So, and I mean, this is the kind of death that, if ever for any reason the storyline was to come back, it'd be pretty easy to bring Nick Fury back, right? I think that's why they do it this way. Even though it's a what if it's popular, and people really like it, Marvel will bring it back and wring the concept, wring the juice out of that thing 100% until it doesn't work anymore. And this is just something I want to say, maybe this is Marvel production department or something. This panel does not look at all like anything in this issue. I feel like maybe there was a problem with the panel that was drawn originally and they replaced it with this. Nothing here to imply either Valentino or Liefeld. And even the background, rather than being an illustration, seems to be like a statted picture of city and buildings that they put in the back here. I could be wrong, but that's definitely what it looks like. And just, aesthetic wise and art wise, this panel just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So 3 days later, we're at Arlington Cemetery, of course. I like this shot here. Just very, very cool. Probably, again, a Valentino layout. Rob Liefeld finishes here and there. This maybe looks a little more like a Scott Williams, Jim Lee kind of deal, even the trees and the textures and stuff. And this here, I would not say that looks like Scott Williams inking or Rob Liefeld or anyone else's. To me, it actually looks more like something you'd see in Daredevil and kind of a scratchier dry brush or kind of Klaus Janson look here, right? Which eventually in Scott Williams inking just will go away and we won't see that. Everything will have kind of a shiny texture. And I do kind of like this more early on Scott Williams inking, because I do feel his textures were more varied, right? So here you're kind of getting that 90s aesthetic that we're going to see everywhere, but on the shadows of these tombstones and stuff, we're getting some old school Klaus Janson, slightly cleaner textures here. Again, the difference in the textures is what's important here, and we're going to lose that as we move ahead with Scott Williams on X-Men and Wildcats and such on Jim Lee. So, of course, what's going to happen? Wolverine is going to become the head director of S.H.I.E.L.D. to replace Nick Fury, and that is basically how this issue ends. So if they were to continue the story in any way, or if it was popular enough, so you'd have Wolverine as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is an interesting concept. Once again, thoroughly enjoy the fact that back then they could still depict the cigar, and Wolverine's constantly chomping on one. I like these color holds too. It's kind of an 80s thing, but people don't do it so much anymore, at least not this way. I like how it differentiates the foreground from the background elements. It creates that sense of depth. Yeah, something a little vintage to it, but that I like, and I think it always looks kind of cool. It's different. I'm not going to go through the Aunt May stuff. These are all parodies, and none of them are actually funny in any way. So, not going to cover that. And there you go. What if Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Do you like the concept? Do you think it's interesting? Leave some comments. You always can. I'll try to respond if I have time. And like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing on my channel and you appreciate, the content. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I hope everyone out there has an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.